This video is for you if you feel like the result is never equivalent to the number of hours and efforts that you put into studying. You are not distracted when you study, you try to study actively, but then 3 hours into 4 hours of your study time, you realize that you've not gone past 2 or 3 pages. The reason is simple: your study technique is not working for you. Finding a study technique that works for you or maintaining a monotonous study technique or study routine actually contributes into the results not being equivalent to the number of hours and efforts that you put into studying. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you the study methods that you are using that's probably not working for you and how to fix it with respect to the kind of learner that you are. A friend of mine shared with me how she would study for 6 hours and realized that she had not gone past 3 pages of her work, and how her study result was not equivalent to the number of hours and effort that she would put into studying, and then eventually she had to change her study technique to fit into the effort that she was putting in. If you are nodding along because you feel like this is you, I have been there too, and that is why I am making this video for you. The number one reason why your study technique is failing is overloading yourself. We've all been there where we feel like if we can put in little time, give it more time, that we will absorb more and we can cover what we just want to cover. You've been studying for a number of hours and you're just like, if I can just finish these few pages, I'm going to be done with what I'm trying to study. But studying for long often stretches your brain and brings a diminishing return, so that your brain gets fatigued instead of retaining the information, and it zones out, because it's not about how much time you spend, it's about how much you cover with the time you spend. The second reason why your study technique fails is lack of variety. Sticking to one study method like rereading, highlighting can get repetitive. Your brain begins to autopilot, which can limit active engagement of the brain. For example, if you're always highlighting your notes, you might not actually deeply understand or deeply engage with the material enough for your brain to retain it. Now, I'm not saying that you should change your study method whenever you want to study, because it can get overwhelming and counterproductive, right? You won't eventually achieve what you aim to achieve. But what I'm trying to say is that if one method is not working again or is becoming monotonous, you can try changing another method just to give it the mix that it needs, so that the studying doesn't get monotonous and boring for your brain, and then eventually you can return to the usual one that you're used to and then exchange it like that. For instance, if you're always rereading your notes, try testing yourself with quizzes and flashcards. So instead of reading your notes and then going back to read it again, you can just write out a quiz question and ask yourself to answer it. Instead of reading it from the textbook and writing the note, just use diagrams, like draw the topic. Okay, we're talking about peace building. Under peace building, there's this, there's that, there's this. You get what I'm trying to say? Instead of highlighting the entire textbook, you can create a mind map or summary chart on your notes. The essence of this is not to abandon the study technique that you are used to, but to alternate and to complement it so that it doesn't get monotonous for your brain. And this is very important and helpful when you find a reduction in your progress and focus level. Just experiment it to create a balance and find what works for you. The third reason why your study technique fails is ineffective environment. The place you study in plays a huge role in how well and how much you can assimilate. If you're trying to study in a very noisy environment, or you are lying on your bed, your studying might suffer. At the same time, if you're also trying to study in a very quiet environment, your study might suffer because you might end up sleeping. For some people, studying in a very quiet environment is the only way they can get the job done. So it is important for you to find somewhere moderate or somewhere that matches the kind of person that you are and the kind of learner that you are. Also, your brain associates certain places with certain activities. For instance, there are some places that your brain automatically associates with relaxation, like your bed with eating, and there are some places that your brain automatically associates with studying, right? So when you are trying to study in places where your brain is not associated with, it might not exactly create the balance that it also. At the same time, being monotonous might also be the problem, because, for instance, if you already associate your brain to studying in the library and you always study in the library, a monotonous routine like that can make your brain get used to it, such that when you are in the library, you begin to sleep, you begin to use the Wi-Fi to go online instead of actually studying the reason you came to the library. The fourth reason why your study technique fails is that you are misjudging your learning style. not everyone learns the same way. Are you a visual learner trying to, associate your learning to audio recordings? Are you a hands-on learner trying to record theoretically? If you don't know the kind of learner that you are and you're studying the wrong way, your study technique will not work for you. And when I get into how to eventually study properly to match your number of hours and effort, you would get to know the kind of learner that you are and the way you should be studying. Because if you don't understand these types and align your learning preferences to it, it's going to be a constant struggle for you. The fifth and final reason why your study technique probably fails is unrealistic expectations. Sometimes we set unrealistic expectations for ourselves because we're lagging behind, or just because we're trying to make the day very productive, right? So you tell yourself that you have to cover the entire textbook today, which in actuality is almost impossible, right? So the effect of that is counterproductive, such that instead of you to keep studying and retaining the information because you want to finish the textbook, your brain gets stressed and the retention level gets lower and slower. Now let's get into the practical techniques to try. The first one is to change your study location mid-session. If you're studying in a specific place, a particular environment for a long period of time, your brain starts to associate it with monotony. A quick change, such as moving to another part of the library, moving to another part of the study room, moving to another classroom, another room, another part of the classroom that you're studying, instead of if you're sitting in the front to study, moving to the back to study, and just changing environment like that plays a huge role that we cannot imagine. What's crazy is that you may not actually see the need to change your environment, because physically speaking, you like the environment. I mean, that's why you went to study there, and you do not want to change the environment. You don't see how changing your environment affects your brain assimilating the information, and you just rather study there for whatever reason. But there is something called context dependent memory. It means that you can recall something because of where you studied it, and that's why some people would rather study in a class if they know that they are going to be taking an exam there, right? So if I know that my paper tomorrow is here, I would rather study my course here, just to associate that place with what I'm studying, and then tomorrow when I'm writing the exam, I can recall that I was sitting here looking at the board when I was mentioning the types and kinds of so. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So when you study in a place that is monotonous, like you're already too used to the environment, it is kind of difficult for your brain to associate that place with what you are studying and trying to remember. So if you study in an environment you are not used to, and it is associated with studying, it helps with assimilation, quick assimilation actually. So switching environments can actually help you retain information better. The second thing is, don't just read the notes. We read our notes and we go many times. We read our notes and we don't check our progress. We go back to check how well we've done. And this is why by the time we're done with our study session, it looks like we've not achieved so much with respect to the number of time that we have spent, right? So don't just read. Quiz yourself, ask yourself questions. After the first 1 hour, check what you've covered and ask yourself questions on it. Do you think it is worth it? Passive reading is never the right way to go about it. Challenge yourself with the material that you're studying. So for example, after reading a chapter or few pages, close the textbook, explain it to yourself, say it aloud, recite key points. This strengthens your memory and helps you to know that you are actually spending your time wisely studying. It is best not to move this to the end, but in between you're studying. Number 3, breaks. Sometimes dedicating large number of hours to study and cover everything that you want to cover is counterproductive. Make sure you check out my video here where I spoke about what to do and what not to do with your study breaks, so you don't end up losing motivation to study just because you took a break. I mean, there are no hard and fast rules to how to take break, but just make sure that your break is not longer than the number of hours you spend studying. Number 4, mind mapping. Visual learners, this one is for you. A visual learner is a person who processes information and retains the information better when it is visual, auditory, rather than any other format. Visual learners tend to understand concepts better when it is presented in diagrams, charts, boxes and summaries and graphs and pictures and the like. Visual learner is someone who would rather study like this than like this, writing out all the notes and all of that. They rather just put out box highlighting the points and using arrows to highlight the subtopics and other divisions rather than writing out all the notes. A visual learner is someone who would rather watch a YouTube video to explain the concept to him or her rather than reading a textbook, or at least a textbook with images and nice colors. So if you're a visual learner, instead of writing out paragraphs of notes, create a mind map. Write out the topic in the center and then use diagrams and graphs and arrows to highlight the subtopics. It's an interactive, engaging, and very productive way to study if you are a visual learner. I am not a visual learner, so I would rather, write out my notes in paragraphs. So if you are not a visual learner, you are trying this, it will probably not work for you. 5. Incorporate movement. If sitting still is not working, try walking around, strolling, standing, little bit of movement as like rocking your chair while you are sitting down, light movements like that, pacing around. Some people or many people find that it helps them assimilate better. And this is why you notice that if you are relaxed and you are studying, maybe mid-semester, you're just trying to study, you realize that you are sitting down and you're studying. But let's say, for instance, you have an examination tomorrow or in a few hours' time, you see that you're walking about, you're pacing, you're saying it, you're trying to check if you know it. That's because it's a very active and good study technique. But the thing is, people try to move it to when it is a matter of urgency because so that in itself shows that it's actually a very effective study method, because you'll find out that when exam or test is closer, that's when you find yourself studying actively. You're carrying your notes and you're walking about, you're studying, you're saying it, you're speaking it out, ways that you do not study on a normal day. Like if you were studying on a normal day, you'll be seated, you'll be calm. So this simply shows that it is a very good study technique. So a light movement, like just pacing around, walking about, standing up from time to time, even when you're sitting down, or just rocking your chairs, like you're moving your chair front and back, even while you're seated in front of your table, helps with assimilation. The sixth and final thing is to reflect and adjust. After the first 2 hours of studying, ask yourself, is this worth it? Of course, the only way to effectively assess this and know if it's truly worth it is if you didn't spend the whole 2 hours or half of the 2 hours getting distracted with your phone or engaging in frivolous conversations. The only way you can truly assess if these 2 hours were worth it is if you committed the 2 hours to study. If you want to learn more about how to study without distraction, make sure to check out my video here. I just never know where to put my finger. Check out if this new method you are trying worked for you. There are times when you will return to your former study method and you will feel fresh again. It will start working for you because you have switched a bit and then the cycle of monotony has been broken, right? And if you notice, you realize that all these techniques I gave are not techniques that ultimately deviates you entirely from the study technique that you are used to. For instance, if you are somebody who is used to rewriting your notes when you are studying, you realize that there was no point I told you to not rewrite your notes, right? You just need to know if that's truly the kind of learner that you are. If you are not a visual learner, because if you're a visual learner and you're using that, then it's not going to work for you. But if you're not a visual learner, rewriting the notes is not the problem. But maybe the problem is changing your environment. You always study in your room. How about going to the library? You always study in the library. How about going to a classroom, right? If you are somebody who studies with flashcards and summary notes and highlighting, that's not the problem. But however, taking like maybe 10 minutes after 1 hour study just to ask yourself questions to truly know if you did not spend all your time just rewriting on a flashcard paper and all of those aesthetics without assimilating, So all these techniques are just to enhance your actual study technique and to break the cycle of monotony, not necessarily to change them, because I think changing your study technique completely is a very difficult thing to do. And I must add that if you truly want to try out new study techniques, I have a video about study techniques. Just check out my playlist of study synergy. You'll see all the videos they watch it. But then I do not advise you trying out new study techniques when you have like a test coming up or an exam coming up, something that's going to test what you truly know. It is not advisable to try new study technique in this case. Stick to what you are used to and what has always been working for you, and then try it out when everything is calm. So there are times where you have to add the spice to it, and there's some time where you will just do the regular thing you do and then it works well and you feel fresh again. If you've not subscribed to my channel at this point, you are definitely missing out on how to take your academics to 100. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.